I truly think technology is human. I think, yeah, there are cases where, the world is feeling overwhelmed. And to me, that's totally valid, and I would never minimize anyone's pain. But the other side of me just says, part of this is growing pains. A part of it is that technology, there are going to be weird use cases to technology. There's going to be technology adoption that, people may not agree with per their philosophical ideology. But at the end of the day, technology does what? Technology enhances capacity and informs and educates. It's on all the time. It's accessible. It's the universe. It has the potential to be the universal constant.
What if governments didn't have to move slowly? Today's guest, Dhruv C. Patel, is challenging one of the most accepted assumptions in public sector innovation. As the co-founder of Syncurrent, Dhruv is using AI to help local and municipal governments unlock billions in funding that often goes unused. At just 26, he's built a platform serving more than 200 governments and partnered with federal agencies like the USDA and the Department of the Interior. This is a conversation about GovTech, mission-driven innovation, and why underserved communities may be the most important market in tech today. Dhruv, thank you so much for joining us on Innovators Inside today.
Thank you for having me.
It's great to have you here. So that's a very impressive bio, especially at the age of 26. And in just a moment, I think we're going to ask you a couple of questions about how you got here to be sitting in front of us today. But I like to start these conversations off with like an icebreaker sometimes, and so I have something that I kind of want to loop you and Ian in on, and that's what is one word you'd use to describe the next decade of innovation? And Dhruv, why don't you go first?
What's one word I would use to describe the next decade of innovation?
Yeah.
Human.
Mm.
Human. I believe technology is wrapping up its childhood, and I think we're moving into its adolescence. And I think the adolescence of technology and the stage that it's going to be more human serving. I think for the longest time, we've seen technology sort of mimic what sort of steam powered engines did in the early days of rapid advancements, but they weren't very human. The people running these steam engines and working in factories, it wasn't very human conditions. But as technology progressed and as we progressed, steam to coal to oil to alternative fuels, technology became more human serving, or that innovation of manufacturing became more human serving over time. I think technology is going to be a lot of the same.
That is such a better answer than my one word, which I'm going to come to in a second. But I love it. Drew, that's an optimist's answer as well, though, that which I think I want to dig into in a little bit. So, Lane, I consider myself an optimist. You know that. I'm usually pretty cheerful and optimistic, but my word is chaos. And utter chaos. And I'm gonna square the circle actually a little bit with what Drew just said, though. But like, I think I think specifically on the next decade, I think we are going to continue to see change at such a pace that it feels that the humans in us cannot keep up, that the organizational infrastructure can't keep up, that we feel perpetually behind, that we feel that the rug is being pulled out from under us professionally and personally. And I do think it's going to feel very, very chaotic. But the interesting thing is that I believe that chaos is going to lead to a reconvergence, if you will, of kind of like technology with sort of the most human elements of us, whether it's, headless AI agents that know us as people and act on our behalf, whether it's things that reconnect us as individuals. I don't know. I do actually believe in that macro trend. I just think we're in for a little bit of a wild ride.
Okay. See, now this is interesting because my word, I think, is kind of it's going to take both of your ideas and put them together, and then I don't know, I guess I'll make a Venn diagram or something. Uncomfortable is my word. And I think that that's because a lot of to what you said, Dhruv, in terms of the adolescence and as things progress, like during the Industrial Revolution, things did start to become once again more human centered. But a lot of that has to do with things like the formation of the union and government regulations around workers' rights and things, which is, I think, what we're here to talk about today to some degree, which is government um, sort of adoption and regulation around different technology.
Hmm.
And to Ian's point, I think that we're starting to see a little bit of that chaos in terms of how rapid things are moving versus how slowly bureaucratic processes move. And that's how I feel about today's conversation.
Huh, this is
Um,
gonna be fun.
yeah,
But
absolutely. So I think to start us off here, why don't you just tell us a bit about your background? What made you want to start Syncurrent, or what were sort of the pieces that fell into place to let that happen, and why are you sitting here with us today?
yeah, yeah, would love to. So my name is Dhruv C. Patel. I'm from Chicago, Illinois. Shout out Chicago Bulls, big fan. Um, what to know Syncurrent, you got to know our last company, Hive. We were just your run-of-the-mill consulting company, and as a consulting company, we had this product which was like a blend of working with economic development organizations, local governments, and entrepreneurs. And we tried selling it. Initially, we tried selling it to the tribal space, the 570, now 75, then 74 federally recognized tribes. And it was through my friend Bazil that we did that. And through that process, a lot of these tribes came back to us and they're like, we want to buy what you got, but we need to look for grant funding. We need funding. We need funding. We need funding. And I'm like, man, what's with all these damn funding obligations? Like, what are we talking about here? Let's go. We're trying to build the future. I'll
Yeah,
find funding for you. How hard could it be to find funding? Can't be that
Famous
hard,
last
right?
words.
Yeah, right. And my even more previous to Hive, I had been a grant writer, wrote grants, grant admin, letter of support, finding partners, creating budgets. I've done the gritty work of grants. And so I'm like, okay, we'll just do it for you. And we started up like this done for you service. And right around that time, my co-founder and I, who's still my co-founder, Matthew, had run into well, I guess it was less running into and more of a nice big introduction. One of my mentors, a friend of his, had sold his tech company, and he's been doing AI for 30 years and machine learning. And so we got together, and he was like, "There's some real tech applications to what you're building, you know." And we were like, "Jump on board, let's do it." And so the three of us spun up Syncurrent. Craig Matson, who's our CTO now, and from that point on, it's been, how do we become the funding tool for local governments? So we shut the other business down, winded down clients, and really full sended Syncurrent.
and so I spend half my life working with startups and early stage and small companies, and one of
Yeah.
my favorite things to do is just put founders on the spot and be
Okay.
like, "Great, give me your one liner." So, what,
Yeah.
Drew? Give us your one liner for Syncurrent. You told us what you do. I actually am really curious to hear what you say here, though.
Yeah. Yeah. Syncurrent's a funding tool for local governments. We reduce the time it takes for local governments and tribes to identify funding from a months long process down to a few minutes.
And it's
Mm.
really interesting because when I think about recipients of funding, right,
Hmm.
and for grant, whether it's through grants or others, I'm usually thinking of non-governmental organizations. They might be,
Okay.
nonprofits. They might be for-profit companies doing deployments.
Hmm.
I'm usually thinking of the governments as the or as the funding providers.
Yeah.
So, tell me a little bit about your customer base. Tell me about the problem that they face in accessing funding and how technology is able to, help you better serve them.
For sure, yeah. So when you think of your government, a lot of people, when they think of government, they think federal government. Maybe they'll think state government. Rarely do they think city of Marquette. That's where I'm based out of today, right? Rarely do we think of city of X or town of X. That's most of the United States. There's 90,000 governments. And if we sat here, how long could you really, if I asked you to name some big cities or name some cities, how long could you go? Right? We could go Chicago, New York, Miami, Houston, and you'd probably get to like 30, maybe 40 at most before you start hitting the and uhs, right? And
You know, if
so,
Not to
Yeah.
interrupt, but if it wouldn't be the most boring podcast ever, I want to do that game with you.
Yeah, that would actually
Yeah.
be such a fun
But I hear
game.
your point.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Yeah. I've done it. I recommend you do it. Yeah. Yeah. No,
Maybe
it's
for the outtakes.
and so now you're at 8,998 or 92 or 800, 8,000 or 80,000, sorry, 80,999, right? We're talking about 30, 40 big cities. There's 90,000 governments. These governments need funding. So you think, okay, let's use a fake city because I don't want to call anybody out. So let's say, town of X. Town of X is a government somewhere, and they need funding. And the reason they need funding is because how do towns make money? Towns make money through taxpayers. They make money through their budgets. They have money through their budgets. They allocate it, but there's only so many avenues to make money as a town. As a tribe, you have different mechanisms that are available to you, and we can talk about that at a later time. But for now, you think of these local governments and how they find funding.
so tell us about kind of the revenue sources and the funding tree for all of these local governments.
Yeah. So local governments, they make money through their taxpayers. But a lot of times, in order to support critical services like roads, schools, and hospitals, you have to go find that funding, right? The funding is made available through state dollars and through federal dollars. But the process of identifying that funding, you have to use old school databases made available through these state and federal governments, or you have to hire people to go do that as part-time or full-time jobs. But most United States are smaller governments that are run by smaller teams. The ability for them to go hire people to do that task is outside of reality. And so now they're stuck between a rock and a hard place. They need funding. They need funding for critical services, and they don't have the technology to make that happen. They don't have the staff. And so what do? You're locked.
So then how, sorry Ian, but just, for our listeners, how again does your tech solve that problem?
Syncurrent, what we do is we take all of the funding available, all of the paperwork, all of the documents, all of the files, what the funding is, what are the requirements. Our AI analyzes oftentimes there's location requirements. You have to be in a presidentially disaster or declared disaster zone, or you need a certain population, or the region needs to meet a certain income requirement. We find all of that information, we organize it, catalog it. The government can come into syncurrent.com, create your account. We need the name of your government, what type of government you are, and just using that, we can mash the two together. So our AI uses reasoning to determine, okay, you're based here, this is your population size. The good thing about government is that the information is public. It has to be public because it's a public entity. So we can find all this information publicly, and we don't need it to be 100% accurate. The chances that your small town's population went from 5,000 to 15,000 is relatively unlikely. So if your population went from 5,000 to 5,500 across, 2 years, that's great. That still works for us. And so we dig through our AI digs through all of this information, we organize it, and we match make the two together. So now a city can come in, create an account, and you have your entire dashboard ready to go, all the funding available.
And so, you completely makes sense to me how, modern technology can go out, crawl the government sites, places publish, put some structure around all of the data, present it. That makes a ton of sense. I'm kind of curious about the customer side of the experience, the technology experience. So the in this case, let's talk about the local governments, right? What do they have to provide? How do they get started
Yeah.
with an engagement with Syncurrent?
Yeah, well, we're also counter positioned in the market. A lot of government technologies, you need to contact a salesperson, do a demo, sit through a demo, go through procurement, sign a contract, and now you get access to the technology. For us, penetrating the market was really important. And a lot of people in this space will tell you government sales cycles take so long. And hearing that over and over again, we were like, okay, well, do they really have to? And so
Right.
we counter positioned. We said, let's do product-led growth. And for those of you who don't know, product-led growth, you do the product to do the growing for you. And so what we did was we enabled users to sign up for free, to make a free account, email, password, name of your government, create a team space. That's it. You visit syncurrent.com, you go through that process, and that's it. And now you're using the Syncurrent platform. The product should do the speaking for you. The reason government sales cycles take too long is for two reasons. One, the government needs to build trust with the vendor that the vendor is who they say or claim to be. And two, there's often when you're doing a sale with the government, you're expecting big dollars. Well, big dollars have to go through a procurement process.
Yeah.
But that's when the dollars hit a certain limit that triggers a procurement process. If you can price your product below that procurement requirement, governments often are able to pull out a credit card or debit card and pay on the spot using public dollars because you're not charging $50,000 for, a 6-month engagement. Our lowest price plan starts at $49 a month. And so for us, we wanted it to be super easy and super trustworthy for governments to come in and go, listen, our product is going to do the speaking for us. You won't be haggled by a salesperson. You might get a few emails from us, but that's it.
So, this is fascinating. And I'll be honest, I think it's impossible to have a conversation about sort of efficient distribution of government resources without getting into appropriate distribution of government resources. So we're gonna get there in a little bit. But for now, when I think about the challenge that you're helping solve, you're basically unlocking access to funding and revenue streams for uh, smaller governments that just don't have the resources to go search them out themselves. Is that a fair statement? And so who benefits? Like who are your heaviest using customers? Who are the customers that are benefiting the most? And do you have any examples of what that has enabled them to do for their constituents and their communities?
Definitely, yeah. So who benefits the most? And give us an example. Who benefits the most is most of the United States. Like I said, there's 90,000 governments. You can sit here and list all the cities off your hand, but there's only so many. And so what about everybody else? What about your towns and villages and most of America, most of rural America, what coastal people call flyover America? What about those governments? Who are they and where are they supposed to go? I can't disclose this government, but there was a government we were working with, and they had a job opening for a grant researcher part-time, open for 2,000 days before they found us. A job posting open for 2,000 days is outrageous. It's outrageous. And so I contacted the city manager and I was like, hey, if you're just looking for research, come look at us. And so they jumped on board and they were like, oh my God, we didn't know this existed.
But isn't that wild? I want to double down on this actually.
Yeah, please.
You're right. A job posting for 2,000 days. But two, they were trying to hire for a job to effectively just go look at this enormous distributed data set and find the relevant resource to apply. Or they were trying to have a whole human do that thing. And then I think the thing that's really interesting is they weren't actually able to. Like we talk about, we can get lost in the gestalt of like AI taking jobs versus augmenting productivity, whatever. This is actually a really concrete example of technology dramatically increasing the productivity of a city manager in a way that they weren't able to do before.
Bingo. Bingo. That's the money right there. It's the fact that, you have these beautiful communities and this beautiful public leaders doing great work, but a lot of times they're so buried in administration, paperwork, and process that they can't actually do their job. And so what we do is we want to eliminate that. We want to go do your beautiful job. Don't spend time looking on the internet trying to find funding. We'll do that for you. And we'll spend all the time. And for us, it takes minutes. For your human being, it takes weeks. Let us do the job and trust us to do a good job. And the product speaks for itself. So what's the AI adoption risk for you?
So actually, let me ask one more question here, and then I'm gonna shut up for a second. But I'm kind of excited. But you've said you've talked about the volume of dollars that are sitting unused out there. You've given an example of the lengths to which city managers and others have to go to access it. But I'm curious: is that the heart of the problem? If you simply make accessing the dollars much more efficient with technology, have you sort of delivered on your promise, or is that just kind of the first step? Like, where does this go next?
It is a huge piece of the problem, but it's definitely not the entire problem because now you have to talk about, okay, now that I found a piece of funding opportunity, I mean, and fun is maybe generous, but a side quest that your audience can take, and I encourage you to even go to grants.gov and go find any funding and then go download the ginormous zip file and then go just like pretend, don't even do it, just pretend to write an application. And what you're going to find a lot of times,
Actually done that.
yeah, you see, there you go. You
It's
download the giant zip file. It's a 120-page PDF about the rules and guidelines. And it isn't until page 23 that you learn that you were ineligible in the first place. And hey, you were supposed to attend a webinar 8 days ago that you're already late for, and you just found the thing, right? And so for us, it's not only do we find the funding for you, we have an opportunity detail screen that breaks down eligibility, status, timeline, steps to apply. So we tell you how many documents you'll actually need to do, and we'll bring the documents right up front for you. So we've seen opportunities where you open an opportunity and it says, click on this web link to fill an application. You click on the web link. Oh, the page was moved in 2012 to this new page. Okay, well, let's go there now. Let's go there now, and let's go there. And then it brings you right back to the source of funding, and the application is actually nowhere to be found. The application is a separate zip file on a website that you skipped over. And so, that's the building the application is a part of it, following guidelines is a part of it, following the webinar schedule, the funding schedule, the application schedule is a part of it. And then you have the entire world of compliance after that. So now that you've funded or you've written an opportunity and you've submitted it and you got it, now there's a world of compliance of you need to fill out these forms on this schedule. And if you miss enough forms and you're no longer eligible for a certain type of opportunity, the space is huge.
I think too, one of the things that you kind of touched on earlier was that really this all came about because of a hypothesis that you formed during a problem that you ran into with another company.
Yeah.
And so I'm curious as to what does like outreach from underserved communities and underserved and small governments and rural governments, that outreach, what other problems? So, we've talked about the volume of grants that there are to apply for, and then we've talked about the ridiculous length of the PDFs that they have to sort through. What other problems are they running into?
Yeah. The biggest ones are capacity. And I know that's a blanket statement, but it's the fact that there's so much work to be done in the funding world and there's simply not enough people to do it. And so anything that helps reduce sort of the timeline in that effort is a enormous help to local governments. And I think that sort of speaks to the broader set of government in its forms of you have outside of funding, you have permitting and you have interacting with the constituents that you serve and they have questions. And oftentimes, if they ask the same question over and over, various people ask the same question, where do I find this website or where do I find this or where's the public meeting agenda? Right? Government is a lot about serving the people. And while that's incredibly important, there are rules and processes to serve the people, and you have to follow those. There's specific ways to do it. There's specific documents you have to follow because it's all standardized. But doing it, sorting it, organizing it, sharing it, it's like a lot of people say governments are adopting technology late. And so a lot of the solutions that you're going to see in government these days are solutions that, corporations solved for years ago. And now governments are keeping up to it. And the fun thing about innovating in GovTech these days is now you have AI. So if you're building AI first, now you can put your AI first spin into it. And that's why government technology, in my opinion, is so hot right now. Is it's like it's taking the classic thing that SaaS solved for corporations using AI first principles to go build a really awesome solution for awesome causes. It's great building a company to go support other companies. Nothing wrong with that. But to me, it's even better when you can build a company to go help people at the end of the day. You can see these tangible outcomes of, oh my God, we found funding that worked for us and this was incredible and thank you so much. Now we can afford that road that we needed, or now we can afford that bridge. Like these are our outcomes. They're bridges, or roads, or people, or schools and hospitals, right? That fires me up. I love that.
So we can sense your energy. I love that you're energized by this because I think this
Thank
is a
you.
big topic. I'll be honest though, I think whether you like it or not, by building a GovTech company at the intersection, that is right at the heart of how capital flows throughout the
Mhm.
public system, you are
Yeah.
going to get dragged into some really interesting and tough policy questions and discussions. So how do you think about that now? as a leader of a tech startup serving the public sector? How do you think about
Yeah.
let's start with questions about the distribution of funds and the policy that informs them. And then in a little bit, I kind of want to get to government innovation writ large. But let's
Yeah.
just start with policy.
Yeah. Well, Syncurrent's policy is to be the funding tool for local governments and to make accessing funds that exist much, much easier for local governments than the status quo. So that's sort of our blanket policy. As far as policy goes for us, it's that the money is appropriated through officials. The public elects those officials, and we trust the public's opinion. The officials go in and they do their business, and they set policies and agendas, and now they create these massive funding packages. And for us, it's okay. Now, how can we take this very complex funding instrument and break it down and organize it and get it to the people, the constituencies of governments as quickly as possible?
Yeah, I love that. And you've picked a piece in kind of the chain that can be dramatically accelerated. So I think there are folks who would argue that friction, especially in government, is a feature and not a bug. That it probably shouldn't be too easy to access and spend public money, even if appropriated properly. What would you say to them?
A good question. Government money shouldn't be spent too quickly, even if it's going to the cause that it's appropriated towards. There should be friction when we're talking about public funding. No, what you want is you want assurance. The reason you want friction, the reason why when you go to buy a car and the car salesman puts up a really good pitch and you tell yourself, I need to think about it, is because you don't actually need to think about it. You might want the car and you might want to say yes. You just don't want to get hurt. You don't want to get screwed.
Yeah.
And so when people say there should be friction in government funding, what you're saying is no, there shouldn't be friction. What there should be is we should know for a fact that the money's getting to where it's supposed to go, that the people who get it are going to do good with it, that they're not going to do bad with it, that the money is getting spent for what it's made for, that you're not taking money for object X and you're applying it to goal Y. And so for Syncurrent, what we do is that's why you elevate what the rules are and the policies and the paperwork surrounding it. You want to make it more accessible, and you want to make it, to my comment way earlier, you want to make it more human. You want to go, if you apply for this funding and you get it, here's what you're getting yourself into, and here's what you're accountable for, and here's what you're responsible for. And that shouldn't be friction. I challenge anybody. If you put yourself in their shoes, you're an entity, let's say the all being entity, and you're in charge of public taxpayer dollars, and a community in earnest is coming to you and says, I'm the town of Dhruv, and we need money for our school district because the children who are using the books are using them from the 1800s, and we would like books from the early 2000s if that isn't too much to ask. Can we have those, please? And you know that that school or that government and that school district in earnest are looking for these funds, and you can prove it. Why the heck would you say no? Why the heck would you say, yeah, go hula hoop dance 15 times and then you might get it? You wouldn't say that. You'd say, of course, local government, of course you can have that because I know who you are.
I love your enthusiasm and framing around this, and how you're able to carve out a niche that, keeps you to an extent in your lane. And I also love the optimism. And we're gonna, but I have some big questions for you about what you have with the data set.
I have a couple
Lane,
questions. I just, because I want to keep going on this topic, because what I'm seeing though is that let's say in one state, you work with, all of a sudden there's 50 rural communities that now have access to, say, a similar grant. Now there's a lot more competition that's been created amongst communities. And so now what I'm wondering then is, I know that you're not privy to that decision-making process, but I wonder what is the effect on funding and who it's going towards as more people have access to your tech. What that looks like to you, say in the next 5 years.
Yep. So I have spoken to a ton of Senate committees about this as well, the people who are appropriating the money, and their perspective is, because this was an early concept that we, were kicking around of, what if we make it too easy? And to me, it's at first, at first glance, on the surface level, you're like, okay, that could be a valid claim. But the more you dig into it, what do appropriators want? Appropriators, again, what is the goal? To get the money to where it's supposed to go. Appropriators want that. You know, that's a bipartisan objective, is to get the money to where it's supposed to go. That's not here or there. And so as a result, if there are, let's say, okay, let's roll with this. You have a funding opportunity. The funding opportunity is to rural communities to support your farmers, and there's only 10 awards and 50 rural governments, all with the same level of need it. And the government makes its decisions, whatever it is, and now 10 communities get it, and 40 communities don't get it. Isn't that, what happens then? What happens is that the people who are making the funding still get notified that the other 40 need it. Government, the federal government especially, is spending, they spend every single day going, what should we prioritize? Yes, every president has their objective, but at the same time, legislators want to know where to put money. I have my district. I want to know what my district needs are. If I deliver on my district needs, then I'm going to get reelected. And you know how the incentive system works. And so for us, if we come in and we say we can optimize funding, well, you're going to plenish all funding. All funding's going to go. No, what's going to happen is that these categories, there's certain categories that no one applied for. And now the folks in government know, hey, maybe we shouldn't appropriate money to that topic because it's not important. The other side of
Mm.
it is the other bucket of funding, you're going to exhaust it, and they're going to know, holy cow, that agriculture program or transportation pro, whatever, really worked. We got the money to where it's supposed to go. We should double down here. There's a real need in the community in the United States.
I am really curious about if you're thinking about the data set, the multiple data sets that you start to build over time,
Mm-hmm.
and how they may, impact other aspects of government efficiency, tech distribution, right? It occurs to me that yes, you can, right now tell the appropriations committees, hey, this money is, in demand, this money isn't, and that's high value data. But you must be getting some signal the other way. You must be getting some signal from what are the local governments looking for? What do they need? How do do you see a way to connect that signal to the policymakers, the legislatures in a different way? And do you maybe see some other more esoteric opportunities that I'm not even thinking about?
For sure, yeah. Well, I'll clarify a point real quick. Are we engage with these folks? We don't do any work with them. We don't currently bill. They're not our customers. Lawmakers and legislators is what I mean.
Totally.
We have friendly conversations. But in that respect, we are looking. We don't know how to do that quite yet, I'll be candid, but that is absolutely an interest area of how can I take the needs of so many governments and get them to what they find funding solutions. And so, we're exploring different ideas on how to do that. But yeah, that's where we're at today.
So here's maybe one of the hardest questions I'm going to ask you today.
Okay.
Brace yourself.
Yeah,
No,
bring it.
no, not really. But look, every time there is significant new innovation in process, in technology, in
Hmm.
anything, there are resistors. There are
Okay.
people who are either left behind by the innovation because it changes the workflow, right? Or the highways moving around the town, whatever it is. There are
Yep.
people who don't like it.
Yep.
What I want to know what you have seen in terms of resistance, not just to like maybe what you're doing as a company, but to the concept of reducing friction in, funding and grant discovery and application.
Yeah. Yeah. What does resistance look like in this space?
Yeah,
Well,
who's
the resistance is the perpetuation of the status quo. And the status quo, you know,
and
for the folks
who benefits from the status quo?
who benefits from the status quo, I don't think anybody, in my perspective. I mean, you're asking a horrendously biased person this question, which is, I understand why it's the hardest question, but that's my answer is no, no. I mean, who does, right? Who does benefit? There might be some corporations that do this and that's their entire bread and butter. And if they benefit, okay, their business, they're solving a need. This is the way they're solving the need. I'm not against that. Everybody has to make a living and that's what they chose. Great. But if what you're resisting is a status quo, the status quo is for some governments, they do have a team. Their team is a rock star. They have a giant Excel spreadsheet or another tool that they use to track all their funding, and they're kicking butt. And they have zero problems. They get funding every year. They know which funding categories to go for, and that's great. they're entitled to that position. They should, okay, that's fine. But that's not, again, we're solving for 90% of America here. That's not 90% of America, I'll tell you that right now, or else we wouldn't exist.
So let's take this to an equity of access perspective, because you say you're solving for 90% of America, and your customer base are the long tail of smaller governments for the most part. I know you have
Mm-hmm.
relationships with federal
Yeah.
agencies and some others, but um, to some extent, uh, if you've solved the problem on the product side, now you have a distribution and awareness problem in front of you. So how do you get in front of these government organizations besides responding to posts? How do
Yeah.
you build awareness? How do you build trust and trial and usage? And how
Mm-hmm.
do you maintain confidence that you are serving the small town of Effie, Minnesota, population 112,
Yep.
just as well as a larger metropolitan area, or Lorain County, Ohio, or a mid-sized tribe?
Definitely, definitely. Yeah, it's two answers. One answer is the opposite of your last question. Who are the resistors? We find the enablers. We find the people in government who are already wanting more to increase access. They want more access to technology. They want more efficiency and funding. We find those. Those are our partners. So recently, Syncurrent partnered with the Massachusetts Municipal Association and the Michigan Municipal League. There are a few of these leagues around the country, and all they do, they're these incredible nonprofit institutions, and they spend their time working with their governments in their state, and they solve for their problems, whether it be insurance, lobbying needs, communication, networking, what have you. They're the sort of anchored partner in government. And so, we've been working with the Michigan Municipal League for about a year now, and they are just incredible. They have incredible foresight, incredible wisdom, incredible knowledge, and incredible trust. More recently, the MML for short, it partnered with a state agency, Labor Economic Opportunity Office, the state of Michigan. It's a state agency, and they created the My Funding Hub. It's like the state tool that organizes all the state funding and federal funding for governments in Michigan. Well, we partnered with them recently to power that tool to provide all the funding opportunities inside of that tool.
Cool.
And so they have this network of about, I want to say a couple hundred, maybe more than a couple hundred governments. And for us, it's let's partner together. Let's power this incredible tool. Please let us use a little bit of your trust with these local governments because you're this awesome figure of authority. And in exchange, we'll bring technology innovation, which you want to provide to these governments because you know them best. That's partnering with the enablers.
Yeah.
The flip side of it is, again, the bread and butter of PLG, each other, right? So how do you get to governments? We get to governments through each other. Uh, we talk the talk, but we also walk the walk. When a government signs up and uses Syncurrent, they go, wow, this is actually incredible. I think my friend Becky, who works in the public office in another government, would love this. And she tells, her friend, and then she tells her friend. And that was the early days of Syncurrent. We started with 10 governments in Michigan, and we had a press release, and that press release ballooned us to 70 that week. And it was a press release, but also we found that for every 10 people that sign up to Syncurrent, 7 or more, on average 7 refer at least 2 or more people inside or outside of their organization to Syncurrent,
That's
which is
incredible.
incredible.
That
We
is
have incredible
incredible.
referral.
These are metrics that any VC would look at and say, a little bit of wow for what is effectively a B2B organization.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. So trust is so important for government, and we want to earn their trust. And the way we do that is to make the product incredibly accessible. And once you do that, you just have to prove that you have a good product and you're not going to break their trust, which we would never.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden you go from, like I said, 10 to 70 to 80 to 100 to now 200.
Okay, I want to take this conversation outside the scope now of what Syncurrent can do.
Mm-hmm.
What, now that you've sort of not cracked the code, maybe that's not the right phrase, but sort of, sort of, found your way in with regard to, this solution in this problem area. What other possibilities do you think there are for the government adoption of different kinds of tech?
Yeah. Oh man, I could spend hours. You could make an entire podcast, dedicated podcast about that. It's again,
Mm-hmm.
when I said, back to my early answer, I hate to keep referring it, but the reason I refer it is I truly think technology is human. I think, yeah, there are cases where, the world is feeling overwhelmed. And to me, that's totally valid, and I would never minimize anyone's pain. But the other side of me just says, part of this is growing pains. A part of it is that technology, there are going to be weird use cases to technology. There's going to be technology adoption that, people may not agree with per their philosophical ideology. But at the end of the day, technology does what? Technology enhances capacity and informs and educates. It's on all the time. It's accessible. It's the universe. It has the potential to be the universal constant. Government, whether it be big government or small government or whatever form of government, we've agreed as a society, is a central node. The central node powers schools. It governs businesses to the best of its ability. It governs its people. It's in managing of the people's taxpayer dollars, and it supports the ideology of the community. Right? It's a central node. And so if it's the central node, we should do everything in our power to support the central node because of its very essence as the central node of society. And so there are thousands of use cases of technology. The world has done such a great job innovating for the corporate world, and while that's beautiful and we've accomplished a lot, again, it just takes me back to let's support the people. Let's support the central node of society. And how do we do that most effectively?
Well, and
Okay. Oh, go ahead,
no,
Ian.
no, go ahead, Lane. Finish your thought. I want to think about this.
Okay. Um, so then we get into this conversation quite often with our guests with regard to, I'm just thinking about barriers because I agree with what you said, but I'm thinking about the idea that especially with regard to AI, it's
Hmm.
evolving so rapidly beyond what government regulatory services can keep up with it in terms of legislation. So things
Okay.
like, should there be, age restrictions on this, or, what are the, ethical or legal ramifications of having something like this? So
Hmm.
what does it look like for governments to adapt AI solutions
Hmm.
without having regulatory structures in place?
Yep. 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 Again, okay, last time I promise, referring back to my previous questions, when I said technology it's in its childhood and we're leaving that and heading towards its adolescence, right? When you're a kid and you see a candle and your mom's not around, you might stick your hand in the fire and that might hurt a lot. And so, but then you learn, hey, if we stick that finger in the candle, that's probably not going to feel too good. And so when we're thinking about technology, like I said, especially in government, especially, we're saying unregulated technology or there's no regulations. Okay, to me, yeah, that is a reality. But at the same time, Albert Einstein didn't ask his local municipality if E equals MC squared, right? He just kind of figured that out, right? We kind of just built the light bulb. We kind of just made the steam power engine. There was no rules for that. We just did it. And then society said, holy cow, wait, you can print 14,000 textiles in an hour? Wait a second, we should probably think about this a little bit, right? And we just slowly evolved. Humans, this is why I particularly love working with tribes in the tribal world, is their timeline is severely different than what, the Western world observes as timelines, right? There's this principle, and I encourage everybody not to sort of take what I'm saying as gospel. Go do your own research on tribal history and tribal principle and tribal philosophy. I'm not a spokesperson for that. But what I will say of my education is there's this concept of 7 generations, right? My friend Bazil, who I cited earlier, is Anishinaabe, and this concept of 7 generations is, we need to make a decision, but the decision we make should be good for 7 generations. We need to be thinking way
Yeah.
ahead. That's very different than, me and you. We think, okay, next quarter. What are my KPIs next quarter? What are my
Yeah.
deliverables? In 60 years, what type of legacy do I want to leave? Right? It's a completely different. Our human perception is so tiny to reality. The reality is that AI regulation will be a hot topic long after I'm dead. But in
Yeah.
the meantime, why should we stop innovating? Why should we stop dreaming and believing and looking to the moon and thinking that we can go there one day? We shouldn't. That's not my opinion. We do need to be safe. I agree. But safe is relative to the inventor. And if the inventor wants to push it, then they're sticking their hand in the fire.
Yeah.
And if that's what they choose to do, then they may succeed or they may get burned.
Well, and to carry the metaphor, right? We can all watch and observe and try and apply the use of fire to our own lives, to our government relationships, et cetera. I do, I do actually think this is really interesting because I appreciate that you are coming from this not just from an optimistic perspective, but from a perspective that, and these are my words, so tell me if I'm putting words in your mouth, but that there is an inevitability to the advance of technology. And we're talking about AI today. We were talking about telecommunications or manufacturing or whatever it was, locomotion and mobility a while ago. But there is inevitability. And so, to an extent, as innovators, it's incumbent on us to recognize, where we are inexorably going and applying any changes needed to our institutions, our products, our technologies. And I'll be honest,
Mm-hmm.
there's one of these maxims. It comes up a lot, right? But it's true. I actually don't think we think about this enough, right? Satisfaction or dissatisfaction is always found in the gap. It's found in the gap between, like how big your house is next to your neighbors. It's found in the gap between the experience you have buying a car or buying a widget on Amazon versus how hard it is to go find this, the product you're trying to buy from the government, whatever it is. And the idea that, you were able to jump right in and say, there's this huge expectation gap, right? There's this expectation gap that has been set that, of course, we should be able to quickly find and research a publicly published data set of, grants and apply.
Yep.
And you're able to shut it down. That leads to satisfaction. And I feel like there's going to be a million of those around government services.
Mm-hmm.
And it's kind of all of our job as innovators to keep the platform caught up with what the constituency and the citizens think is possible in the world. And I mean, it's really interesting, like passport applications. My, friend of the podcast, Alistair Kroll, who runs the Functional Government podcast, which, I don't know if you've heard of it, but you should check it out. He's taking a look at
awesome.
Canadian federal government and technological innovation. He's done a deep dive into things like passports. And this is in Canada, but actually it looks pretty similar to the US and to a lot of countries. And it's absolutely wild. Once you sort of step back and say, okay, I accept that in this world, everybody believes that communication can be instant, that we can validate identity in a myriad different ways, right? Banks do it every single day, that we can, that we can share information between databases seamlessly and with high authority. Once you accept that, then what we are doing with passports looks crazy. And I wonder how many other problems like that exist within government where smart innovators can just pick one and just say the gap between what it should be and what it is so big, and that I can build a product and it's just going to get adopted. We're not going to list them all, but there's got to be 1,000 of those.
Oh yeah, and especially in the international stage, sometimes you have the governments adopting, which I know sounds outrageous, but it's true. I was at IMF World Bank 2024 spring meetings, and we had a government technology session, and I mean some of the stuff that different countries are adopting and doing. David Eves, he's a professor at the London School, and he is just the most. I encourage everyone listening to check him out. I've had a few conversations with him. He's very, very smart. The stuff he talks about going on in India, Latin American countries, especially with financial technology. I've heard comments. I haven't been to India in a very long time, but I've heard comments that in India, it's more common for people to pay with a cell phone than it is with cash or card.
Sure.
And that to me, that is true in the United States to a certain degree. We have Apple Pay and all that stuff, but I'm hearing India takes it to an entirely different level. And what I'm also hearing is that the Indian government at the time was largely responsible for that adoption, that they promoted it, that it was a form of economic mobility to turn phones into wallets. And that creates, the incentive to be able to spend easier and not have to track money. And that's again, you're talking about the central node, right? We're talking about central nodes here. the most important note to society. When we innovate here, society gets better. And who doesn't want that?
I think a lot of this, though, operates under the assumption that everybody has a smartphone or
Yeah.
that everybody has access to the internet or things like that. Because I was thinking about how, like, for like fingerprints processing, say like here in Canada, they do this thing where like they've got high tech, UV lighting to take your fingerprints, and then they send that information digitally to Ottawa, and then you get a letter in the mail letting
Wow.
you know that your fingerprints have been processed. It's not an email, it's not a text message to your phone. And I was mystified by that until I realized that, well, because there are a lot of people, like people that I even know in my own city, that like the
Mm-hmm.
access to the internet or having a smartphone is still to a certain degree privileged
Yeah.
access.
Yeah.
And so I think
Yeah.
that that's something to consider too, is that then if we were looking at like putting pressure on government systems to adopt certain things that are technologically advanced, then you have to democratize access to the simple pieces that need to be put in place in order to make that happen. So internet should then be a lot cheaper or free. you know
Yeah.
there regulations on how much you can charge for a basic smartphone and things like that. And so this is why, like, I know that I keep saying regulation, but it's just I see all of these different things that need to be put into place in order to
Yeah.
create the access that we're trying to give to these underserved communities or underserved populations in you know in
Yeah.
certain regions. So
Yeah, that's totally a fair perspective. Yeah. For us, it to us, Mark Andreessen has this topic of technology as a substrate, which I love.
Yeah.
Technology is the growth material. It's that the social construct already exists, and technology is just the enabler, the substrate, the growth material to make that happen. And that's kind of what you're commenting on, right? As far as the accessibility goes, that's above the scope of Syncurrent. I wish we could provide everybody on the planet a nice laptop with some internet. But for the time being, even the communities that need it the most, I mean, like I said, Syncurrent works with tribal nations, right? We have 57 federally recognized tribes last I checked using the Syncurrent platform. I've engaged with a lot of them. I've talked with dozens of tribal leaders. We've done hundreds of tribal consultations. Tribal communities have the internet access gap, true, but a lot of times, they have what they have, but they still want to be in the fight. They still want
absolutely.
Yeah.
to. They're still here. They don't want to be left behind. I've talked to. Oh my God, there's a tribe in Minnesota. I won't. Again, I don't have their permission, so I won't disclose their name. But there's an incredible tribe in Minnesota that we work with, and I just love the people there. And there's this older lady. We're talking 70s, 80s grandma who works in that tribal government, and she loves our technology. She doesn't love technology generally, but she loves our technology because it's simple and easy to use. And hearing her talk about her experience with Syncurrent, that's like, again, that's what we're here for. And those are her words. I won't disclose her, but those are her words. Is I don't want to be left behind, Drew. Thank you for building technology because I don't want to be left behind. I agree. I don't want you to be left behind either. Not everybody in your community has a laptop, but you have a computer and you can find funding. And if we can find funding together, we might be able to support the ability to go get more laptops for the rest of the community.
Yeah. Well, Drew, I think actually that is a really good kind of note to close on, because if there's one consistent theme on this pod with all of our guests, and I think we've hit on it, it's that technology and innovation properly applied it helps ensure that people aren't left behind. It is the way that,
Yeah.
these existential issues get solved. And I love what you've been doing. Thank you for coming on Innovators Inside, sharing what you've been building with Syncurrent. I think you have picked a tight, cleanly scoped, incredibly important problem space to go tackle. And do you know what I love? I'm not saying this to pick on you and your engineering team or anything. You've done something where the innovation is not technical. Technology has caught up to the place where where you can apply in smart ways the capabilities that exist in the world to a problem that was really hard and unsolvable 10 years ago. And that is what innovation is. And you've built a whole bunch of amazing technology to do it. But really, what you've really done is you've gone to process and customer innovation. You said there's this huge gap between what should be possible and what we're doing today, and let's solve it. And if you're doing that for government, that in the end benefits all of us. So thank you for coming on Innovators Inside, Dhruv. Thank you for sharing your story and engaging with us. And we can't wait to hear what you and Syncurrent do next.
Thank you. Thank you so much.